Somewhere on this planet, there are cities that were buried on purpose, towers built without mortar that still stand after 2,000 years, tombs older than the pyramids, holding names we will never know. They were not built to be mysterious, they were built to last. In this journey, we move quietly through these forgotten places, across deserts, highlands, jungles, and windswept islands, exploring the real structures that once carried power, belief, and daily life. What remains is stone, and the silence it has kept for centuries. Hattusa, the vanished capital of the Hittites. In the highlands of central Turkey, where rolling hills stretch beneath a wide and open sky, there are the remains of a city that once stood at the center of an empire. Today, the land is quiet. Stone walls wreathe from the earth in broken lines, tracing the outline of streets and gates that once carried movement and authority. Wind passes slowly across the plateau, moving through grass and stone without resistance. This is Hattusa. More than 3,000 years ago, this place was the capital of the Hittite Empire, one of the great powers of the ancient Near East. Long before the rise of classical Greece or imperial Rome, the Hittites built a kingdom that rivaled Egypt and Babylon in strength and influence. From this highland city, they governed vast territories, negotiated treaties, and commanded armies that moved across Anatolia and beyond. Today, only stone remains, but the stones still speak quietly of what once existed here. Hattusa was not built on flat ground. The city followed the natural contours of the hills, creating layers of walls and terraces that blended into the landscape. Massive fortifications encircled the settlement, stretching for several kilometers. These walls were built from enormous stone blocks at their base, with mud brick rising above them. Even now, the lower stones remain in place, fitted together with care and precision. Entering the city required passing through monumental gates. One of the most famous is the Lion Gate, where carved stone lions still stand guard. Their faces are calm but watchful, shaped with deliberate detail. Though time has worn their edges smooth, their presence remains powerful. They once marked the boundary between the outside world and the protected heart of the capital. Beyond the gates, the city expanded across terraces and open courtyards. Temples, administrative buildings, storage chambers, and residential quarters filled the space within the walls. At the center stood the Great Temple, a structure dedicated to the chief deities of the Hittite pantheon. Its foundation stones remain visible today, outlining rooms that once held sacred objects and ceremonial offerings. The Hittites were deeply connected to their beliefs. Religion was not separate from governance. Kings ruled not only as political leaders, but as intermediaries between their people and the divine world. Rituals were carefully recorded on clay tablets, many of which were discovered within Hattusa's ruins. These tablets preserved laws, treaties, myths, and administrative records written in cuneiform script. The survival of these tablets has allowed historians to understand the Hittite world in remarkable detail. They reveal a society organized with structure and discipline. They describe diplomatic agreements, including one of the earliest known peace treaties in history, signed between the Hittites and ancient Egypt after years of conflict. This treaty reflects a world already shaped by negotiation and political balance. From Hattusa, messages once traveled across great distances. Envoys moved along trade routes. Armies marched beyond the mountains. Merchants carried goods between regions. The city was not isolated. It stood at the crossroads of civilizations, connecting Anatolia with Mesopotamia and the eastern Mediterranean. To the northeast of the main city lies Yazilikaya, an open-air sanctuary carved directly into rock. Within this sacred space, reliefs depict long processions of deities, carved into stone with steady hands. The figures appear in profile, arranged in ordered lines, moving toward a central meeting point. These carvings reflect not only artistic skill, but belief. They were shaped with intention, designed to endure within the natural rock itself. Even after thousands of years, their outlines remain visible, protected by the stone that surrounds them. The environment around Hadassa contributed both to its strength and its vulnerability. The elevated position offered protection from invasion. The surrounding hills created natural barriers, but maintaining such a city required resources. Food, water, and materials had to be transported and stored carefully. Archaeological evidence shows large storage facilities within the city, indicating preparation for long periods of need. The Hittites understood the importance of stability in a region where seasons and politics could shift quickly. For centuries, Hattusa remained the heart of the Hittite Empire, but around the late 12th century BCE, something changed. The empire collapsed. The reasons remain uncertain. Some historians point to external invasions during a time of widespread instability across the eastern Mediterranean. Others suggest internal pressures, resource shortages, or political fragmentation. The archaeological record shows signs of destruction and abandonment. The city was left behind. Walls that once echoed with movement became silent. Temples that once held ceremony stood empty. Wind replaced voices. Over time, soil covered sections of the city. Mud brick dissolved. Wood decayed. Only stone endured. For centuries, Hadassa was forgotten. Its name faded from memory. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that archaeologists began to uncover the ruins systematically. Excavations revealed the scale of the city and confirmed its identity as the long-lost Hittite capital described in ancient texts. The rediscovery of Hadassa changed historical understanding. It confirmed that the Hittites were not simply mentioned in the records of other civilizations, but were themselves a powerful and organized empire. Today, the ruins remain where they were built. The Lion Gate still stands. The great temple's foundations remain visible. The walls continue to trace the outline of a vanished capital. The surrounding hills are quiet. Grass moves gently with the wind. The sky above remains open and unchanged. Hattusa no longer governs an empire. Its kings no longer send envoys across distant lands. But the stones remain, holding the memory of a civilization that shaped the ancient world from this highland plateau. And in the quiet stillness of central Turkey, the vanished capital continues to endure, not through power or conquest, but through the silent strength of the ruins that remain. Choqquequirao, Machu Picchu's forgotten sister. High in the Andes Mountains of southern Peru, where steep valleys descend into deep river gorges and clouds drift slowly between jagged peaks, there is a city that remains quiet and largely unseen. It rests on a narrow ridge above the Apurimac River, surrounded by dense vegetation and shifting mountain mist. Reaching it requires a long journey on foot, descending and climbing through rugged terrain where the air grows thinner and the landscape feels distant from the modern world. This place is Choqquequirao. Its name, derived from the Quechua language, is often translated as Cradle of Gold. Yet unlike its more widely known counterpart, Machu Picchu, Choqquequirao remains mostly silent. Fewer visitors arrive here. The path is demanding. The isolation remains intact. More than 500 years ago, this city stood as part of the Inca Empire, one of the most sophisticated civilizations of pre-Columbian America. The Inca built across the Andes with remarkable precision, shaping stone without mortar, aligning structures with the land rather than against it. They understood the mountains not as obstacles, but as foundations. Choqquequirao was built during the 15th century, likely under the rule of the Inca Emperor Pachacuti or his successors. It occupied a strategic and symbolic position, overseeing routes that connected the highlands to the Amazon basin. The city was not randomly placed. It was carefully positioned within a landscape that held both defensive advantage and spiritual significance. The first site of Choqquequirao reveals terraces descending along the mountainside. These terraces were constructed to prevent erosion and create agricultural space on steep slopes. Stone retaining walls support layers of soil, allowing crops to grow at high altitude. The design reflects careful planning and understanding of the environment. The Inca shaped their cities with balance. Structures were arranged around open plazas. Residential buildings, ceremonial spaces, and storage areas were positioned according to both practical and spiritual considerations. At Choqquequirao, foundations of stone buildings remain visible, outlining rooms that once sheltered families, priests, and administrators. The precision of the stonework reflects a level of craftsmanship that required patience and knowledge. Each stone was cut and shaped to fit closely against the next. Even after centuries of exposure to weather and seismic activity, many walls remain intact. The Inca did not rely on mortar. They relied on balance and exact fitting. This technique allowed their structures to withstand earthquakes, shifting slightly without collapsing. At the center of Choqquequirao lies a large ceremonial plaza. From here, one can see across the valley to distant ridges layered in blue and green tones. The mountains rise and fall in endless succession, creating a landscape that feels both protective and immense. To build here required coordination. Materials had to be transported across steep slopes. Workers shaped stone at high altitude. Agricultural terraces had to be maintained carefully to support those who lived within the city. Choqquequirao was not merely a retreat. It was an active settlement integrated into the broader Inca network. Roads connected it to other important centers. Messengers known as chasqui carried information across vast distances, moving quickly along mountain paths. The Inca Empire relied on such communication. The city may also have served as a refuge during the final years of resistance against Spanish conquest. As Spanish forces advanced across the Andes in the 16th century, Inca leaders retreated to remote locations. Choqquequirao's isolation would have made it a suitable place of temporary safety. Over time, however, the city was abandoned. Without maintenance, vegetation slowly reclaimed the terraces. Soil accumulated between stones. Trees and shrubs grew across once open plazas. The structure remained beneath layers of plant growth, hidden from easy view. Unlike Machu Picchu, which remained relatively intact and visible, Choqquequirao became enveloped by the mountain itself. It was not rediscovered by modern explorers until the 18th and 19th centuries, and even then its scale was not fully understood. Systematic archaeological work began much later, gradually revealing the extent of the site. Even today, only a portion of Choqquequirao has been fully excavated. Much remains beneath the soil and vegetation. One of the most remarkable features of Choqquequirao lies within its agricultural terraces. On certain terrace walls, archaeologists discovered white stone inlays forming the shapes of llamas. These designs appear almost hidden within the broader structure, visible only when viewed from certain angles. The llamas are not large, they are subtle, but they reflect intention. The Inca integrated symbolism into architecture. The llama, an essential animal for transport and livelihood, became part of the visual language of the city itself. The environment surrounding Choqquequirao continues to shape its presence. Clouds move across the ridge, rain falls in seasonal patterns. Sunlight shifts across terraces and stone walls. Silence dominates. The absence of large crowds allows the site to remain close to its original character. Walking through its plazas, one hears wind moving across grass and distant birds echoing through the valley. The scale of Choqquequirao suggests that it may have rivaled Machu Picchu in size and importance, yet it remains less known, partly because of the effort required to reach it. This isolation has preserved a sense of quiet continuity. The Inca built not only for immediate use but for endurance. Their cities were shaped with awareness of landscape and climate. They respected the mountains as living elements within their world. Choqquequirao reflects this philosophy. It stands not as a monument imposed upon nature, but as a structure woven into it. Centuries have passed since the last inhabitants left its terraces. Empires have risen and fallen. Roads have changed. Nations have formed, but the stones remain. The terraces continue to hold the mountainside in place. The plaza continues to open toward the sky. In the high Andes of Peru, where clouds move slowly across ancient ridges, Choqquequirao endures as a quiet reminder of a civilization that understood how to build in harmony with the land, leaving behind a city that remains both present and patient beneath the shifting light of the mountains. Sigiriya, Sri Lanka's fortress in the sky. In the heart of Sri Lanka, rising above forests and plains that stretch toward distant mountains, there stands a single column of stone that seems almost separate from the earth around it. It rises nearly 200 meters into the sky, its sides steep and smooth, its summit flat and wide. From far away, it appears as a natural formation shaped only by geological forces. But as one approaches, the presence of human design becomes clear. This is Sigiriya. For centuries, it has stood in stillness, watching over the surrounding landscape. The wind moves along its rock face. Trees gather at its base. Clouds pass slowly above its summit. And yet, more than 1,500 years ago, this towering rock became the center of a royal ambition. In the 5th century CE, during a period of political tension within the ancient kingdom of Anuradhapura, a prince named Kashyapa seized power in a way that changed the course of his life and the landscape itself. According to historical chronicles, Kashyapa claimed the throne after conflict with his father, King Datusena. His rule was marked by both fear and determination. Rather than remain in the traditional capital, Kashyapa chose to build a new stronghold. He selected this immense rock rising from the plains. The decision was strategic. From the summit, one could see across vast distances. Approaching armies would be visible long before they reached the base. The rock itself formed a natural fortress, its steep sides difficult to climb without preparation. But Sigiriya wasn't built solely as a military refuge. It became a palace. The transformation of the rock required extraordinary effort. Workers carved stairways into the stone. They shaped terraces along its sides. They constructed elaborate gardens at its base, forming one of the earliest known examples of symmetrical landscape design in Asia. These gardens were not simple arrangements of plants. They were carefully planned water gardens, complete with pools, fountains, and channels designed to move water with precision. During the rainy season, water still flows through some of these ancient systems, demonstrating the advanced hydraulic knowledge of those who built them. As one ascends the rock today, the path winds upward through a series of platforms and staircases. About halfway up, there is a sheltered gallery carved into the rock face. Within this gallery, fragments of ancient frescoes remain visible. These paintings depict female figures, often described as celestial maidens or apsaras. Their expressions are calm, their hands hold flowers, their forms are rendered with softness and attention to detail. Though centuries have passed, their colors remain visible against the rock, protected by the overhang above. Below the frescoes lies a polished wall once known as the mirror wall. In ancient times, it was said to be so finely finished that the king could see his reflection as he passed. Over the centuries, visitors carved inscriptions into its surface, leaving poems and reflections that have survived from as early as the 8th century. These inscriptions describe admiration for the paintings and the beauty of the site. They reveal that Sigiriya remained a place of memory long after its royal period ended. Near the summit, one encounters the Lion Gate. Massive stone paws flank the final staircase, carved to resemble the claws of a great lion. Originally, The entrance to the upper palace was framed by the full body of a lion sculpted around the stairway. Today, only the paws remain, but they still convey the intention of the design. The lion was a symbol of power. Passing between its paws marked entry into the royal domain. At the top of the rock lies the plateau where the palace once stood. Foundations of buildings remain visible, outlining rooms and courtyards that once housed the king and his attendants. From this height, the surrounding landscape unfolds in every direction: green forests, distant hills, and open plains. The wind at the summit carries a sense of distance. It's easy to imagine the solitude that Kashyapa may have felt here, elevated above the land he ruled. But his reign did not last long. Historical records suggest that Kashyapa eventually faced a challenge from his brother, the rightful heir to the throne. In the confrontation that followed, Kashyapa's forces faltered. According to tradition, he chose to end his own life rather than face capture. After his death, Sigiriya ceased to serve as a royal palace. The capital returned to its earlier center. The fortress in the sky was abandoned as a seat of power. Over time, it became a Buddhist monastery, its spaces adapted for religious use. Later still, it fell into relative obscurity, gradually reclaimed by vegetation and silence. The rock itself endured. Rain fell against its surface. Sunlight warmed its summit. The gardens at its base shifted with seasons. Centuries passed quietly. When Sigiriya was rediscovered by European explorers in the 19th century, it once again captured attention. Archaeological study revealed the sophistication of its construction. The integration of architecture, art, and landscape demonstrated a level of planning that required coordination and knowledge. Sigiriya was not simply a fortress, it was an expression of vision. The water gardens reflect geometric precision. The frescoes reflect artistic mastery. The lion gate reflects symbolic authority. Each element contributes to a unified design that merges natural formation with human intention. Today, Sigiriya stands as one of Sri Lanka's most remarkable historical sites. Visitors ascend the same pathways carved more than 15 centuries ago. They pause beside the frescoes. They pass between the lion's paws. They stand at the summit and look outward across the land. Yet even with visitors present, there are moments when the site returns to stillness. Early in the morning, when mist rises from the plains, the rock appears almost suspended between earth and sky. The forest below remains quiet. The water in the gardens reflects soft light. In these moments, Sigiriya feels less like a monument and more like a presence. It reflects the ambition of a king who sought security and height. It reflects the craftsmanship of workers who shaped stone and water into harmony. It reflects the passage of time, during which power fades but structure remains. The fortress in the sky no longer serves as a palace or a stronghold, but it continues to endure, rising above the plains of Sri Lanka, unchanged in its elevation, watching silently as centuries move forward beneath its shadow. Shali Fortress, the silent citadel of Siwa Oasis. In the far western desert of Egypt, close to the border with Libya, there is an oasis that feels separate from the rest of the world. The land here is vast and quiet, surrounded by endless sand that stretches toward the horizon. Palm trees rise from the earth where underground water reaches the surface, creating a green island within the desert. This is Siwa Oasis, a place shaped by isolation, sunlight, and silence. At the center of this oasis stand the remains of a fortress, built not from stone but from earth itself. This is Shali. From a distance, Shali appears almost like a natural formation, a cluster of walls and towers rising in irregular layers. Its color matches the desert around it, blending into the landscape as if it grew from the ground, rather than being constructed by human hands. The material used to build it is known locally as kershef, a mixture of salt, mud, and clay that hardens under the desert sun. More than 700 years ago, in the 13th century, the people of Siwa built this fortress as protection. At that time, desert communities were vulnerable to raids and conflict. The isolation that provided safety also required vigilance. By constructing a fortified settlement, the inhabitants could protect themselves within high walls, narrow passages, and elevated towers. Shali was not a palace. It was not built to display power. It was built to endure. The design of the fortress followed the natural slope of the land. Houses were constructed closely together, sharing walls for stability and insulation. Narrow alleyways wound between them, creating shaded passages that reduced exposure to the intense desert heat. The density of the structure also provided defense, making it difficult for outsiders to navigate. The walls rose several stories high in places, forming a compact city within a single enclosure. At its peak, Shali housed hundreds of people. Families lived within small rooms built from kershef, their lives shaped by the rhythm of the oasis, cultivating dates, tending to livestock, and drawing water from wells. The material itself reflects adaptation. Kershef is formed from the salt deposits common in the region. When mixed with mud and left to dry, it becomes firm under the sun. It provided insulation against heat and required no distant quarrying of stone. The builders used what the land offered, shaping their environment into shelter. But this material also carried vulnerability. While it withstands dryness well, it weakens under heavy rain. For centuries, Shali remained stable. The desert climate preserved its walls. The people inside maintained and repaired the structure as needed. The fortress became the heart of Siwa, both physically and socially. Within its walls were a mosque, storage rooms, and communal spaces. The elevated position allowed watchmen to observe the surrounding desert. From the towers, they could see travelers approaching from great distances. Life inside Shali followed a quiet order. The oasis provided water and dates. The fortress provided safety. The desert provided isolation. In 1926, an unusual and intense rainfall struck Siwa. Heavy rain is rare in this region, and the storm brought more water than the kershef walls could endure. As the rain soaked into the salt-based material, sections of the fortress began to collapse. Walls softened and crumbled. Towers weakened. Many residents moved to newly constructed homes outside the original walls, built with more durable materials. Shali gradually became abandoned as a living settlement. The fortress that had protected generations began to return to the earth. Yet, even in ruin, Shali retains its presence. The remains still rise above the oasis, their forms shaped by erosion but recognizable. Narrow passageways remain visible. Fragments of staircases lead upward to empty spaces. The mosque tower still stands, marking the center of the structure. Walking through Shali today, one moves through quiet corridors where footsteps echo softly. The walls bear the texture of salt and clay, rough beneath the hand. Openings reveal views of palm groves below, but where green contrasts against desert tones. The silence here feels layered. It carries the memory of voices once heard within the walls. It carries the memory of families who lived in close proximity, sharing space for protection and survival. Shali reflects a different kind of monument. It is not grand in scale like pyramids or temples. It does not display elaborate carvings or polished stone. Its significance lies in adaptation. It reflects how communities shape their environment with available resources, building structures that meet practical needs while blending into the land. The fortress also reflects impermanence. Built from earth and salt, it was always part of the desert's cycle. When heavy rain came, it reminded the inhabitants of the limits of material and the power of nature. But the people of Siwa remained. They rebuilt their lives beyond the crumbling walls. The oasis continued to provide water. Palm trees continued to grow. Shali became a silent witness to continuity. Today, preservation efforts seek to stabilize parts of the fortress, preventing further erosion while respecting its original form. Visitors walk through its corridors carefully, aware that the material beneath their feet has endured centuries of sun and wind. As the sun sets over Siwa Oasis, light turns golden across the fortress walls. Shadows lengthen along the uneven surfaces. The desert beyond grows quiet as temperatures cool. Shali remains where it has always been, no longer filled with daily life, yet still standing. It reflects a time when survival depended on unity within walls built from the land itself. It reflects resilience shaped by isolation. And in the stillness of the Egyptian desert, the fortress continues to endure, rising gently above the oasis that gave it life. Stony Littleton Long Barrow, a chamber beneath the hill. In the gentle countryside of Somerset, in the southwest of England, the land rolls quietly beneath wide skies. Fields stretch in soft curves, divided by hedgerows and narrow country lanes. The air carries the scent of grass and damp soil, and in the distance, low hills rise without sharp edges. Among these hills lies a long, grass-covered mound that at first appears natural. It rests within the landscape without drawing attention to itself. This is Stony Littleton Long Barrow. More than 5,000 years ago, during the Neolithic period, this mound was constructed deliberately by a community whose names we no longer know. They lived in a time before written language in Britain, before metal tools, before cities. Their world was shaped by farming, seasonal rhythms, and close connection to the land. The Long Barrow stretches approximately 30 meters in length. From above, its shape is elongated, tapering slightly toward one end. The mound was built from earth and stone, layered carefully to form a raised structure that could endure. At one end lies the entrance. Large stones form a facade, marking the threshold between the outside world and what lies beneath. When one steps through the entrance passage, the light fades quickly. The narrow corridor leads inward, lined with upright stones placed with intention. The air inside feels cooler. The sound of the outside world softens. At the end of the passage, the corridor opens into a central chamber. From this chamber branch, smaller side chambers arranged symmetrically along the length of the mound. These stone-lined spaces were not built randomly. Their layout reflects planning and understanding of weight distribution. Massive capstones rest overhead, supported by upright stones that have held their place for thousands of years. This structure was not a dwelling. It was a tomb. Excavations carried out in the 19th century revealed human remains within these chambers. The bones belonged to multiple individuals, suggesting that the barrow served as a communal burial site, rather than the resting place of a single person. The people who built Stony Littleton placed their dead within these chambers over generations. They returned repeatedly. They reopened the passage. They placed remains inside with care. The bones found within the barrow reflect a community connected by kinship and shared identity. Neolithic burial practices in Britain often involved collective tombs, where the dead were gathered together rather than separated individually. This suggests that identity may have been understood not only at the level of the individual, but at the level of the group. The mound itself became a marker in the landscape. From a distance, it would have stood out against the surrounding fields. Its position allowed it to remain visible across open ground, linking the living with those who had come before. Building such a structure required coordination. Large stones had to be moved without metal tools or machinery. The community likely used wooden rollers, ropes, and collective effort to transport the stones into place. Each capstone, weighing several tons, had to be lifted carefully and set upon its supports. This required patience. It required planning. It required trust and shared purpose. The Neolithic period in Britain marked a time of transition. People had begun farming and settling more permanently. Forests were cleared, fields were cultivated, communities grew around shared land. Monuments like Stony Littleton reflect this shift. They mark the land not only for practical use, but for memory. The barrow aligns roughly east to west, with its entrance facing the rising sun. This orientation may have carried symbolic meaning. Many Neolithic monuments in Britain show attention to solar cycles, reflecting awareness of the sun's movement across the horizon, the rising sun appearing each. Morning may have symbolized renewal. The tomb facing that direction may have reflected belief in continuity. Time has altered the structure gently. The mound's outer stones have weathered. The earth has shifted slightly, but the core remains intact. Inside, the chambers still hold their form. Standing within the central space, one becomes aware of the stillness. The stones absorb sound. The air feels unchanged. It is possible to imagine the people who once entered here, carrying the remains of someone they knew, stepping carefully through the narrow passage. They did not leave written records. They left stone. Over thousands of years, the surrounding landscape has changed. Agricultural practices have evolved. Roads have been built. Villages have grown nearby. But the long barrow remains. Grass grows across its surface, blending it into the hill. Visitors today can walk along its length, observing its shape against the sky. They can step inside, moving along the same passage carved into the mound thousands of years ago. There is no decoration within, no carved symbols, only stone placed with intention. Stony Littleton, Long Barrow, reflects a time when communities marked their presence through earth and rock, shaping the land into memory. It reflects a quiet understanding that life and death were part of the same landscape. The mound rests gently within Somerset's rolling fields. The wind moves across it as it has for centuries, and beneath the grass-covered surface, the chambers remain, holding the silent presence of those who were laid to rest there long ago, preserved within the enduring structure built by hands that shaped stone into permanence. Guremi rock structures, the carved world of Cappadocia. In central Turkey, within the region known as Cappadocia, the land rises and falls in soft waves of stone. The landscape appears almost sculpted by imagination. Tall rock pillars stand like silent towers. Conical formations rise from the earth, shaped by wind and erosion over thousands of years. At sunrise, the stone glows in warm tones of gold and rose. By evening, it returns to muted shades of gray and pale brown. This is Goreme. At first glance, the formations appear entirely natural. And in origin, they are. Millions of years ago, volcanic eruptions covered this region with layers of ash and lava. Over time, the ash compacted into a soft rock known as tuff. Wind and rain gradually carved the surface, shaping valleys, chimneys, and ridges. But human hands changed the story of this landscape. Rather than building upon the rock, people carved into it. For thousands of years, communities hollowed out rooms, corridors, and sanctuaries within these formations. The softness of the tuff allowed it to be shaped with simple tools. Over time, entire networks of dwellings emerged, hidden within the hills themselves. The earliest known use of these rock shelters dates back to ancient Anatolian civilizations. Later, during the Roman and Byzantine periods, the region became an important refuge for early Christian communities. Seeking safety from conflict and persecution, they carved churches directly into the stone. Inside these carved spaces, walls were painted with careful attention. Frescoes depicting biblical scenes and figures covered the ceilings and arches. Though centuries have passed, many of these paintings remain visible, preserved by the stable interior climate of the rock. The Goreme Open Air Museum contains some of the most well-preserved examples of these cave churches. The Dark Church, for example, earned its name because limited light entered its interior. helping protect the paintings from fading. Within its chamber, one can still see figures outlined in deep blues and reds, expressions calm and composed. The artists worked in confined spaces. They climbed scaffolding within narrow rooms. They painted across curved ceilings carved from stone. Their work reflects dedication and belief, shaped within walls that were not constructed but hollowed. Beyond churches, the rock formations housed entire communities. Rooms were carved to serve as kitchens, storage areas, and living quarters. Small windows allowed limited light and ventilation. Some structures extended multiple levels downward, forming early examples of subterranean architecture. The design was practical. The stone provided insulation against extreme temperatures. Summers in Cappadocia can be hot and winters cold. Within the rock, temperatures remain relatively stable. The carved dwellings offered comfort and protection. In some parts of Cappadocia, underground cities extended far below the surface. Though Göreme itself is known primarily for its visible rock formations, the region as a whole contains extensive networks of tunnels and chambers carved beneath the earth. These underground spaces could shelter hundreds of people. They contained wells, ventilation shafts, and storage rooms. Large stone doors, carved in circular shapes, could be rolled into place to block passageways. This design reflects preparation. Communities anticipated periods of danger. They built their protection directly into the land. The rock chimneys that rise above Göreme today are sometimes called fairy chimneys. Their tall, narrow shapes result from harder stone caps protecting softer layers beneath. Over time, erosion sculpted them into distinct forms. Some were left untouched. Others were hollowed out and adapted into dwellings. Walking through Göreme today, one sees openings carved into nearly every visible surface. Doorways and windows punctuate the rock faces. Some lead to small chambers. Others open into larger spaces with carved arches and columns. The architecture follows the natural contours of the stone. There are no straight streets, no grid of planned roads. Instead, paths wind through valleys, shaped by both erosion and human adaptation. The relationship between people and landscape here feels balanced. Rather than clearing the land to impose structure, the inhabitants shape their homes within the existing formations. The result is a settlement that blends into its environment almost completely. Over centuries, the region changed hands multiple times. Different cultures left their influence. Some structures were abandoned, others were reused. The frescoes faded slightly with time, but many survived. Today, Göreme remains one of Turkey's most remarkable historical landscapes. Visitors walk through the valleys, entering carved rooms that once sheltered families. They stand inside churches where painted figures have watched silently for 1,000 years. They look upward at rock chimneys shaped by forces both natural and human. Yet even with visitors present, the atmosphere retains a sense of quiet. At dawn, when hot air balloons rise slowly above the valley, the light touches the rock gently. Shadows stretch across the formations. The air remains still. The stone does not move. It carries within it layers of time. Göreme reflects not a single civilization, but continuity. It reflects the ability of human communities to adapt creatively to their environment. It reflects faith expressed through art carved into stone. It reflects survival achieved through shelter shaped from earth itself. The volcanic rock that formed millions of years ago became the foundation for homes, churches, and hidden chambers. And in the valleys of Cappadocia, beneath skies that shift from gold to blue, the carved world of Göreme remains patient and enduring, holding within its walls the quiet presence of lives once lived inside the stone. Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, the stone chamber of ancient Wales. In the Vale of Glamorgan in southern Wales, where rolling green hills meet open sky and stone walls divide quiet farmland, there stands a structure older than the pyramids of Egypt. It rests within a grassy field, modest in appearance from a distance, yet unmistakable in its presence. This is Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. The monument was built around 6,000 years ago, during the Neolithic period. At that time, communities across Britain were transitioning from a life of hunting and gathering to one rooted in farming and settlement. Forests were cleared gradually, crops were planted, livestock were kept, and alongside these changes, people began to construct long-lasting monuments from stone. Tinkinswood is one of these monuments. The burial chamber consists of a large capstone resting upon upright stones, forming a rectangular chamber beneath it. The capstone itself is immense. It weighs an estimated 40 tons, making it one of the largest capstones in Britain. Its surface is rough and weathered, shaped by both ancient tools and centuries of exposure. The structure was originally covered by an earthen mound, known as a long barrow, which would have extended outward from the chamber. Today, much of the mound has eroded, leaving the stone chamber visible against the landscape. Standing before it, one becomes aware of its scale. The capstone extends outward like a protective roof. The entrance passage leads inward through aligned stones into the dark interior. The design reflects planning and understanding of weight distribution. The upright stones support the massive slab above, positioned carefully to prevent collapse. Building such a structure required cooperation. The stones had to be transported from nearby sources, likely moved using wooden rollers, ropes, and coordinated effort. The lifting and positioning of the capstone would have demanded patience and precision. Without metal, tools, or machinery, the builders relied entirely on collective strength and knowledge of leverage. The chamber within Tinkinswood served as a communal burial site. Excavations conducted in the early 20th century revealed human remains inside the chamber. The bones belonged to multiple individuals, suggesting that the monument was used repeatedly over generations. The remains were not placed in separate graves, but together within the same enclosed space. This pattern reflects a broader tradition of Neolithic collective burial. The focus was not on individual identity as understood today. Instead, burial within the chamber reinforced connection to ancestry and community. The monument became a shared place of remembrance, marking both the land and the lineage of those who lived nearby. Fragments of pottery and stone tools were also discovered within the chamber. These objects suggest ritual activity associated with burial. The chamber may have been reopened multiple times, allowing additional remains to be placed inside. Each reopening would have been a deliberate act, reinforcing continuity between the living and the dead. The orientation of Tinkinswood is notable. The entrance faces roughly east, toward the rising sun. This alignment may have held symbolic meaning. Across Britain and Ireland, many Neolithic monuments show attention to solar movement, suggesting that communities observed seasonal cycles carefully. The rising sun could have represented renewal. Positioning the entrance toward that direction may have reflected a belief in continuity beyond death. The surrounding landscape contributes to the monument's atmosphere. The Vale of Glamorgan remains peaceful. Fields stretch outward in soft green tones. The sky above often carries slow-moving clouds. From the burial chamber, one can see across the gentle slopes of the countryside. The monument does not dominate the land aggressively. It rests within it. Over thousands of years, the environment has shifted around Tinkinswood. The earthen mound that once covered the chamber has partially disappeared. Weather has smoothed the stone surfaces. Lichens grow across the capstone, blending it further into the landscape. Yet the core structure remains stable. The upright stones still hold their position. The capstone still rests securely above. The chamber still opens inward, offering space beneath the earth. Legends have grown around the site. Local folklore once suggested that spending a night within the chamber on certain evenings would result in awakening either as a poet or as someone changed in unexpected ways. Such stories reflect the enduring sense of mystery that surrounds ancient monuments. But beyond legend, Tinkinswood reflects tangible human effort. It reflects a community shaping stone into structure. It reflects awareness of the land's permanence and the desire to anchor memory within it. The Neolithic people who built this chamber did not leave written records. They left architecture. Their understanding of weight, balance, and alignment remains visible. Their decision to gather remains within a shared chamber, reveals social values that prioritized continuity and belonging. Today, visitors approach Tingenswood across quiet fields. They stand before the capstone and sense its scale. They step carefully into the interior, where sound softens and light dims. The space feels enclosed, yet stable. The air inside carries stillness. It is possible to imagine those who once gathered here, carrying the remains of someone known to them, placing them gently within the chamber. Outside, the Welsh countryside continues its rhythm. Rain falls, grass grows. Seasons shift from green to gold and back again. The burial chamber remains. It does not speak. It does not move. But within its stone walls lies a memory of a time when communities shaped the land, not only for shelter and farming, but for remembrance. In the quiet fields of southern Wales, Tingenswood continues to endure, its massive capstone resting as it has for 6 millennia, holding within its shadow the silent presence of those who were laid to rest beneath its stone roof long ago. Dolmen of Soto, the stone corridor beneath the earth. In the quiet countryside of southwestern Spain, near the banks of the Guadalquivir River, there is a grassy mound that at first appears simple and natural. The land around it is open and calm, shaped by farmland and distant hills. Olive trees and low vegetation stretch beneath a wide Andalusian sky. Nothing about the mound immediately reveals what lies beneath it. This is the Dolmen of Soto. More than 5,000 years ago, during the late Neolithic period, a community gathered here to build a structure that would outlast their own lifetimes. Beneath the earth, they constructed a long stone corridor leading to a central chamber. Today, much of the outer mound remains intact, but inside, the carefully arranged stones still stand as they were placed in prehistory. The entrance opens toward the east. This alignment was deliberate. As the sun rises during certain times of the year, its light travels down the passageway, reaching deep into the interior. The builders observed the sky and marked their monument accordingly. They did not leave written records, but they left alignment in stone. Stepping inside the Dolmen of Soto, the air cools immediately. The passage stretches forward in a narrow line, flanked by upright slabs of stone placed side by side. These stones support horizontal capstones above, forming a roof that encloses the corridor. The passage extends nearly 20 meters in length. Each stone was transported, shaped, and positioned without metal tools. The effort required to construct such a monument reflects coordination and shared purpose. The stones were not gathered randomly. They were selected and arranged to create stability and symmetry. The corridor gradually widens as it approaches the inner chamber. This chamber, circular in form, served as the central burial space. Excavations carried out in the early 20th century revealed human remains within the monument, indicating its use as a collective tomb. Multiple individuals were buried here over time. The monument was not sealed permanently after a single burial. Instead, it was reopened, used again, and maintained across generations. This reflects a tradition of collective remembrance rather than individual separation. The Dolmen of Soto belongs to a broader tradition of megalithic architecture across Europe. Communities from Ireland to Portugal built long barrows, passage graves, and stone circles during this period. Though separated by distance, these societies shared a common impulse to shape stone into lasting form. Within the corridor of the Dolmen of Soto, carvings can still be seen etched into the surfaces of certain stones. These markings are simple but deliberate. Lines, shapes, and symbols whose meaning is no longer fully understood. Some resemble weapons, perhaps axes or daggers. Others appear abstract. The carvings suggest that the monument held symbolic meaning beyond burial alone. It may have served as a place of ritual, a place where the living gathered, a place where light entered briefly and marked time. The orientation toward the rising sun connects the structure to cycles of renewal. During equinoxes, sunlight reaches deeper into the corridor, illuminating the inner chamber in a way that must have carried significance. The builders understood seasonal change. They understood movement of light. They captured that movement within stone. The outer mound that once covered the entire structure provided insulation and protection. Earth was layered carefully over the stone passage, creating a hill that blended into the landscape. From a distance, the monument would have appeared as a natural rise, concealing the corridor beneath. This blending of structure and environment reflects a relationship between people and land. The monument does not stand apart from its surroundings. It rests within them. Over millennia, the landscape has shifted gently. Agriculture has changed the surrounding fields, roads have been built nearby, but the dolmen remains in its original position. The stones have weathered. Their surfaces carry marks of time, but the corridor still holds its shape. Walking through the passage today, one becomes aware of the quiet. The stone absorbs sound. Footsteps echo softly against the slabs. The ceiling feels close yet secure. It is possible to imagine the people who once entered here carrying the remains of someone known to them, stepping carefully into the dim interior, guided by light at certain times of year. The dolmen of Soto reflects not power but continuity. It reflects a community investing effort into a space meant to endure beyond a single generation. The monument required planning, alignment, and patience. It required belief in something lasting. Outside, the Andalusian countryside remains peaceful. Wind moves across fields. The sky shifts from bright blue to soft evening tones. Birds pass overhead without notice of the ancient corridor beneath the mound. But beneath that grassy hill, the stone passage continues to exist, exactly where it was placed thousands of years ago. It holds memory without inscription. It holds presence without voice. And in the stillness of southwestern Spain, the dolmen of Soto endures quietly. Its long corridor aligned with the rising sun, preserving within its stone walls the silent rhythm of life and death that shaped the people who built it. Bandolier stone structures, the cliff dwellings of the high desert. In northern New Mexico, where mesas rise above deep canyons and the sky stretches wide over the high desert, there are cliffs that hold quiet traces of human life. The land here feels open and still. Juniper and pinon trees grow across rocky ground. The air is dry and light moves gently across the red and tan surfaces of volcanic stone. Within Frijoles Canyon, carved into soft rock along the cliff walls, are openings that once sheltered entire communities. This is Bandelier. More than 700 years ago, ancestral Pueblo people made their homes in these cliffs and on the canyon floor below. They shaped the rock into living spaces, creating a settlement that blended naturally with its environment. The stone they worked with was volcanic tuff, formed long ago by eruptions that spread ash across the region. Over time, this ash hardened into rock that was soft enough to carve, yet strong enough to endure. The cliff dwellings at Bandelier appear as dark openings set into pale stone. Some are small, forming single-room shelters. Others connect into larger clusters, forming multi-room homes accessed by wooden ladders. The ladders, now reconstructed for visitors, reflect the original method of entry and movement between levels. Living in the cliffs offered protection from weather and from potential conflict. The rock provided insulation against summer heat and winter cold. It also allowed residents to observe the canyon below while remaining partially concealed. Below the cliffs, stone structures built from shaped blocks once formed additional homes and communal buildings. These structures were arranged carefully along the canyon floor, near the Frijoles Creek, which provided water essential for agriculture and daily life. The people who lived here were farmers. They cultivated crops such as corn, beans and squash in fields along the canyon. They stored food in carefully constructed rooms, ensuring stability through seasonal change. They gathered wood from surrounding forests and shaped it into beams to support roofs and ladders. The settlement was not isolated. Trade networks connected communities across the Southwest. Materials such as turquoise and pottery styles moved between regions, reflecting exchange of goods and ideas. The people of Bandelier were part of a broader cultural landscape that extended across what is now New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado. Within the cliffs, some dwellings contain petroglyphs carved into stone. These markings, created with simple tools, depict shapes, symbols, and figures whose meanings are not fully known today. They reflect communication, memory, and perhaps spiritual belief. The ancestral Pueblo people organized their communities with shared responsibility. Some structures appear larger and may have served ceremonial purposes. Circular kivas, subterranean ceremonial chambers, were part of their architectural tradition. These spaces were used for gatherings and rituals that reinforced social connection. Life in Bandelier followed the rhythm of the land. Seasons determined planting and harvest. Water availability shaped movement and settlement. The canyon offered shelter, but it also required adaptation. Farming at high elevation demanded knowledge of climate and soil. The people understood how to manage resources carefully, ensuring continuity over generations. Around the late 13th century, many ancestral Pueblo communities began to move from cliff dwellings to other areas. Environmental factors, including drought, may have contributed to this shift. Archaeological evidence suggests that the departure was gradual and organized rather than sudden. The dwellings were not destroyed, they were left intact. The canyon slowly returned to quiet. Over centuries, wind and rain weathered the stone. Wooden beams decayed. Soil accumulated within rooms, but the carved openings remained, protected by the cliffs that housed them. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, archaeological study began to document the structures of Bandelier more carefully. Preservation efforts followed, recognizing the cultural importance of the site. Today, Bandelier National Monument protects the canyon and its dwellings, allowing visitors to walk the same paths once used by its inhabitants. Standing beneath the cliffs, one can see the openings carved into stone, aligned in quiet rows. The ladders lean against rock faces, echoing the vertical movement of daily life centuries ago. The creek continues to flow along the canyon floor, unchanged in its course. The high desert remains silent in the early morning. Sunlight reaches the upper cliffs first, gradually descending into the canyon. Shadows shift slowly across the stone. The dwellings do not speak. They remain as they were shaped, integrated into the rock itself. Bandelier reflects adaptation rather than domination. The people who lived here did not reshape the canyon dramatically. They carved gently into existing formations, creating shelter within what nature had already formed. Their architecture reveals understanding of climate, material, and community structure. The stone structures remain not as ruins of conquest, but as evidence of continuity. They reflect a culture that thrived within its environment, balancing human need with natural form. In the stillness of Frijoles Canyon, beneath open New Mexico skies, the carved dwellings of Bandelier continue to endure. Their dark openings remain visible against pale rock, holding within their quiet chambers the memory of lives shaped by land, season, and shared purpose. Quiroquita structures, the circular stone homes of ancient Cyprus. On the southern coast of Cyprus, overlooking a bend in the Moroni River, there is a low hill covered with stone foundations that appear simple at first glance. The Mediterranean lies not far away, and the land around the site is dry and sunlit for much of the year. Olive trees and shrubs grow across the slopes, and the air carries the steady warmth of the island climate. This is Quiroquita. More than 9,000 years ago, During the Neolithic period, one of the earliest known farming communities in the Mediterranean established itself on this hill. At a time when much of human society was still adapting to settled life, the inhabitants of Kirikitia built permanent structures from stone and shaped a community that would endure for centuries. The most distinctive feature of Kirikitia is the form of its houses. Unlike the rectangular buildings familiar today, these homes were circular. Their foundations were built from limestone blocks gathered from nearby areas. The walls rose thick and sturdy, forming enclosed spaces that sheltered families from heat and wind. Each house was modest in size but carefully constructed. The circular design provided stability and efficient use of space. Roofs were likely made from branches, reeds, and mud, forming domed coverings that completed the enclosure. Inside, platforms built from stone and earth may have served as sleeping areas or work surfaces. The settlement was not scattered randomly across the hill. The houses were arranged closely together, forming a dense cluster that reflected shared life. Narrow passages wound between them. Walls connected structures, creating a sense of unity and protection. Around the outer edge of the settlement, a thick defensive wall once stood. This wall suggests that, even in early agricultural communities, there was awareness of vulnerability. Protection was necessary. The builders of Kirikitia understood that their stability depended not only on crops and livestock, but on security. The people who lived here cultivated wheat and barley. They kept domesticated animals such as sheep and goats. Archaeological evidence shows tools made from stone, bone, and antler, shaped carefully for daily tasks. Grinding stones used to process grain remain visible at the site. Life followed a seasonal rhythm, planting in cooler months, harvesting under the Mediterranean sun, storing food for continuity. The Moroni River below the hill provided water and fertile land. Its presence shaped the settlement's location. The inhabitants chose this hill carefully, balancing access to resources with elevation for protection. Burial practices at Kirikitia reveal another layer of life. In several cases, individuals were buried beneath the floors of their homes. This practice reflects a close relationship between living space and ancestry. The dead remained physically present within the household, integrated into daily life rather than separated in distant cemeteries. This suggests a worldview centered on continuity. The house was not only a shelter for the living, it was a space of memory. Excavations at Kirikitia began in the 20th century, gradually uncovering the layout of the settlement. Archaeologists revealed multiple layers of occupation, showing that the site was inhabited for many generations. The circular houses were rebuilt and repaired over time, maintaining the same design principles. The consistency of the architecture suggests cultural stability. The builders passed down knowledge of construction and layout across centuries. The choice of circular design may have held symbolic meaning, or it may have reflected practical considerations such as structural strength and ease of roofing. Regardless of intention, the result was a community defined by uniformity and cohesion. Kirikitia stands among the earliest examples of planned settlement in Europe. It reflects a pivotal moment in human history when mobility gave way to permanence. The transition to farming reshaped social organization. Communities became more structured. Homes became fixed. The hill overlooking the Moroni River became a place of continuity. Over time, the settlement was abandoned. The reasons are not entirely clear. Environmental changes, resource pressure, or social shifts may have contributed, but the departure appears gradual rather than violent. The structures were left in place. Stone endured where wood and reed decayed. For thousands of years, the foundations remained partially visible beneath soil and vegetation. Today, Kirikitia is preserved as a protected archaeological site. Some houses have been reconstructed to demonstrate their original appearance, allowing visitors to step inside circular spaces similar to those built 9 millennia ago. Standing within one of these reconstructed homes, the scale becomes clear. The space feels enclosed but secure. Light enters softly from above. The stone walls curve gently, creating an atmosphere of containment rather than confinement. Outside, the Mediterranean landscape remains calm. The river continues its quiet movement. Birds pass overhead without awareness of the ancient settlement below. Kirikitia reflects the beginning of something lasting. It represents a stage when human communities committed themselves to land, shaping stone into dwellings meant to endure beyond a single season. It reveals adaptation not through grand monuments, but through practical design repeated consistently over time. The circular homes do not rise high. They do not dominate the horizon, but their foundations remain visible across the hill, outlining a community that once thrived in balance with its surroundings. In the warmth of the Cypriot sun, among stones placed by hands thousands of years ago, Kirikitia continues to rest quietly, holding within its circular walls the memory of one of the Mediterranean's earliest settled lives, Chand Bauri Stepwell, the geometry of water. In the village of Abhaneri, in the state of Rajasthan, northern India, there is a structure that does not rise toward the sky, but descends into the earth. From the surface, only its upper walls and surrounding buildings are visible. But standing at its edge, the ground suddenly opens into a vast geometric pattern of stone steps leading downward in precise symmetry. This is Chand Bauri, built more than 1,000 years ago, likely during the 8th or 9th century CE under the rule of the Chahamana dynasty. Chand Bauri was designed as a stepwell, a structure created to collect and preserve water in a region where rainfall is scarce and temperatures are high for much of the year. Rajasthan is a land of heat and dry wind. Summers are intense. Water has always been both necessity and challenge. The people who built Chand Bauri understood this reality deeply. Rather than constructing a simple well, they shaped an architectural solution that combined utility, engineering, and quiet beauty. The stepwell descends approximately 20 meters into the ground. Along 3 of its sides, more than 3,000 narrow stone steps form a repeating triangular pattern. Each step aligns with the next in strict order, creating a visual rhythm that appears almost infinite when viewed from above. The 4th side contains a series of pavilions and corridors where carved pillars and shaded galleries provide relief from the sun. These structures allowed visitors to rest in cool air, protected from direct heat. Water rests at the lowest level. In seasons of greater rainfall, the well fills higher. During dry periods, the steps provide access as the water level recedes. The design ensures that water remains reachable regardless of fluctuation. Descending the steps today, one notices a change in temperature. With each level, the air becomes cooler. The stone absorbs heat above but shelters the interior from the full intensity of the sun. The deeper one goes, the quieter it becomes. The repetition of steps creates a sense of calm order. There is no ornamentation on the stepped walls themselves, only precise geometry. The builders focused on alignment and symmetry, shaping sandstone blocks into stable patterns that have endured for more than a millennium. Chand Bauri was not only a source of water, it was a gathering place. In earlier centuries, stepwells across India served as social and spiritual spaces. People came not only to draw water, but to meet, to rest, and to participate in rituals. Water held sacred significance in Indian traditions, representing purification and life. Near Chand Bauri stands the Harshet Mata temple, dedicated to a goddess associated with joy and happiness. Though the temple's structure has changed over centuries, its presence reflects the spiritual context surrounding the stepwell. The integration of water architecture and sacred space demonstrates the layered purpose of the site. The engineering required to construct Chand Bauri was considerable. The builders excavated deep into the earth, stabilizing the walls with stone blocks carefully cut and positioned. The geometry was not accidental. It required planning, measurement, and understanding of structural balance. Each step supports the next. Each wall counters the pressure of surrounding soil. The alignment of lines ensures stability. Over centuries, the structure has withstood monsoon rains, intense heat, and shifting ground. The sandstone has weathered gently, its edges softened, but its form intact. Standing at the top and looking downward, the pattern creates a visual illusion. The steps appear to shift and overlap. Shadows move across them as the sun travels overhead, altering perception hour by hour. Yet the structure itself does not change. It remains anchored in the earth. Chanbauri reflects a deep relationship between community and environment. In a region where water determined survival, architecture became an act of adaptation. The stepwell allowed storage of rainwater during brief monsoon seasons and preserved it for months of dryness. The descent into the earth symbolized more than practicality. It represented access to a resource essential for life. The design also reveals a quiet, aesthetic sensibility. The repetition of steps is precise but not decorative. Beauty emerges from proportion rather than ornament. The geometry feels intentional, measured, and calm. Over time, political powers shifted across Rajasthan. Kingdoms rose and fell. Trade routes changed, but Chanbauri continued to serve its purpose. Even when modern water systems reduced reliance on stepwells, the structure remained as part of the landscape. Today, visitors stand at its edge, often in silence, absorbing the depth below. The steps descend in steady rhythm toward still water. Birds circle overhead. The heat of Rajasthan presses lightly on the surface, while cooler air lingers below. The well does not speak. It holds its shape. It reflects centuries of understanding that survival depends on preparation. In Abaneri, amid dusty roads and village life, Chanbauri continues to exist as both monument and memory. It is not grand in height, but in depth. It does not dominate the skyline, but anchors itself beneath it. And in the quiet repetition of stone steps descending into shadow, the geometry of water remains preserved, patient, and enduring beneath the Rajasthani sun. Wari Pikilakta sector blocks, the silent grid of an Andean empire. In the highlands of southern Peru, not far from the city of Cusco, there is a plateau that rises above the surrounding valleys. The air here is thin and cool. Mountains stretch in layered ridges toward the horizon, their slopes marked by grasses that shift gently in the wind. The sky feels close and open, with clouds drifting slowly across the Andean landscape. On this plateau stands the ancient site of Pikilakta. Unlike many archaeological sites that follow the curves of the land, Pikilakta appears ordered and deliberate. From above, its walls form straight lines and right angles, dividing the space into rectangular compounds. The layout resembles a grid, precise and structured, extending across the plateau with quiet symmetry. Pikilakta was built by the Wari civilization, an empire that flourished between approximately 600 and 1000 CE, centuries before the rise of the Inca. The Wari expanded across large portions of the central Andes, establishing administrative centers and settlements that reflected centralized planning. Pikilakta was one of these centers. The site covers more than 50 hectares and contains hundreds of enclosures. Thick stone walls, some rising several meters high, define individual blocks. These walls were constructed from fieldstones set in mud mortar. Though the stones are not as finely shaped as later Inca masonry, their arrangement is stable and enduring. Walking through Pikilakta today, one moves along corridors formed by high walls on either side. The rooms within the compounds are rectangular, uniform in size and layout. The repetition creates a sense of order that contrasts with the surrounding natural landscape. The builders did not simply adapt to the land's irregular shapes. They imposed structure upon it. This suggests administrative purpose. Many scholars believe Pikalakta functioned as a provincial center within the Wari Empire. Its grid layout may have served as housing for officials, storage facilities, or military personnel. Large open plazas indicate spaces for gathering and coordination. The presence of storage rooms reflects organized resource management. The Wari, like later Andean societies, relied on careful distribution of agricultural goods across diverse ecological zones. By controlling settlements like Pikalakta, they could manage movement of maize, potatoes, and other crops between highlands and valleys. The site's position was strategic. It overlooked important routes connecting different regions of the Andes. From this elevated plateau, one could observe the surrounding landscape clearly. The settlement's visibility may have reinforced warrior authority in the region. Unlike later Inca cities, Pikalakta appears to have been completed but only partially inhabited. Archaeological evidence suggests that some structures were never fully finished. Doorways lack final shaping. Certain areas show signs of construction halted before completion. This raises questions. Was the site abandoned due to political change? Did environmental pressures alter settlement patterns? The answers remain uncertain. What is clear is the intention behind its design. The grid pattern reflects centralized planning rarely seen in earlier Andean settlements. The Wari demonstrate understanding of spatial organization at large scale. Their architectural choices reflect authority, discipline, and administrative control. The surrounding environment shaped daily life. Highland winds move steadily across the plateau. Temperatures drop sharply at night. Water sources had to be managed carefully. The builders constructed canals and channels to direct water into the settlement, ensuring supply for inhabitants and agriculture. Within the compounds, smaller rooms may have served as living quarters, workshops, or storage chambers. The uniformity suggests standardized planning rather than organic growth. Unlike villages that expand gradually over time, Pikalakta appears to have been constructed in a coordinated effort. The name Pikalakta translates roughly from Quechua as flea town, a later designation given long after the Wari period. The original name used by its inhabitants has been lost to time. When the Wari Empire declined around the 10th century, many of its administrative centers were abandoned. Political fragmentation and shifting alliances likely altered the structure of power across the Andes. Pikalakta was left behind. Over centuries, the roofs of its buildings collapsed. Mud mortar eroded. Vegetation grew between stones, yet the walls endured. From a distance, the site appears as a pattern etched into the plateau. Rectangular blocks form an ordered maze. The silence here is distinct. Wind passes through open corridors without obstruction. There are no towering temples or ornate carvings. There is geometry, there is alignment, there is repetition. Pikalakta reflects an empire focused on organization rather than display. Its architecture communicates authority through order. The straight lines contrast with the natural curves of the mountains beyond. Standing within its compounds today, one senses scale. The walls rise high enough to create enclosure, yet open to the sky. The arrangement suggests that many individuals once moved through these corridors, carrying goods, messages, and responsibilities tied to imperial governance. The Wari civilization influenced later Andean societies, including the Inca. Administrative practices, road systems, and architectural planning developed by the Wari may have laid foundations for future empires. Pikalakta remains as evidence of that earlier chapter. The plateau continues to feel open and expansive. Clouds cast shifting shadows across the stone blocks. Distant mountains frame the horizon. The grid remains fixed. Time has softened edges, but not intention. In the highlands near Cusco, where wind moves steadily across ancient walls, the sector blocks of Wari Pikalakta endure as a quiet reminder of an empire that organized its world in straight lines against the vast and curved landscape of the Andes. Scarabray Core. the stone village beneath the sand. On the western coast of mainland Orkney, where the North Atlantic meets low green cliffs and the wind rarely rests, there lies a cluster of stone structures older than the pyramids of Egypt. The sea moves steadily against the shore. The sky shifts quickly between pale blue and gray. Grass grows close to the ground, shaped by a constant wind. This is Skara Brae. Today, the site appears as a group of partially sunken stone rooms arranged in close formation. But more than 5,000 years ago, during the Neolithic period, this was a living village. Families moved through these spaces daily. Fires burned within hearths. Voices carried softly between walls. The village was discovered in 1850 after a powerful winter storm stripped away layers of sand that had covered it for centuries. As the sand receded, stone walls emerged, revealing an almost intact settlement hidden beneath the dunes. Skara Brae had been preserved not by deliberate protection, but by burial. Wind-driven sand gradually covered the village after it was abandoned, sealing it from weather and disturbance. The covering acted as insulation, preserving walls, furniture, and layout in remarkable detail. Unlike many ancient settlements where only foundations remain, Skara Brae retains built-in stone furniture. Each house contains a central hearth, positioned to provide warmth and light. Along the walls are stone beds, shaped carefully with raised edges. Opposite the entrance stands a stone dresser, often considered the focal point of the room. These furnishings were not later additions. They were integrated into the architecture itself. The walls of each house were constructed from flat slabs of local stone, stacked carefully without mortar. The roofs, now lost, were likely made from driftwood, animal hides, and turf. Timber was scarce in Orkney, so the builders relied heavily on stone for nearly every structural element. The houses were connected by covered passageways. These low corridors linked rooms together, allowing movement between dwellings without exposure to harsh weather. The design suggests a closely connected community, where families lived in proximity and shared resources. The core of Skara Brae consists of 8 houses arranged around a central area. The layout appears planned rather than accidental. Each dwelling follows a similar design, with variations in size and detail. This uniformity reflects shared understanding of construction and social organization. The people who lived here were farmers and fishers. Archaeological evidence shows that they cultivated barley and kept livestock such as sheep and cattle. The nearby sea provided fish and shellfish. Tools made from stone and bone were discovered within the houses, including needles, knives, and scrapers. Orkney's environment required resilience. The Atlantic climate can be severe, with strong winds and long winters. Building partially into the ground provided insulation and protection. The earth surrounding the walls helped maintain stable interior temperatures. Inside each house, the hearth formed the center of daily life. Food was prepared here. Warmth radiated outward. Light flickered against stone walls. The stone dresser opposite the doorway may have held objects of importance, tools, vessels, or items of symbolic value. Its prominent position suggests that it served more than a practical purpose. Life in Skara Brae continued for several centuries, from approximately 3,100 BCE to 2,500 BCE. The reasons for its eventual abandonment are not fully known. Environmental change may have altered the coastline. Shifting sands and rising sea levels could have made continued habitation difficult. The departure appears gradual rather than violent. No signs of sudden destruction were found. The houses were left behind. Wind and sand completed the rest. For millennia, the village remained concealed beneath dunes. When it reemerged in the 19th century, archaeologists began careful excavation. The removal of sand revealed the preserved interiors, providing rare insight into Neolithic domestic life. The scale of Skara Brae is modest. There are no towering monuments here, no carved statues or grand temples. Instead, there are rooms, beds, hearths, storage boxes carved from stone. It reflects ordinary life. The core of the settlement demonstrates that even 5,000 years ago, people organized their living spaces with intention. They planned for comfort, warmth, and shared community. They shaped stone not only for burial monuments, but for daily existence. Standing within one of the houses today, the ceiling is open to the sky, but the walls remain firm. The central hearth marks the heart of the room. The stone bed rests quietly against the wall. The dresser faces the entrance as it did thousands of years ago. Outside, the Atlantic continues its movement. Waves break against the shore. Wind passes across the grass. The coastline has shifted slightly over millennia, but the core of Skara Brae remains anchored where it was built. It is a village preserved in silence. It shows how early communities balanced survival with structure, adapting to their environment through careful design. The integration of furniture into architecture reflects foresight and permanence. In the quiet of Orkney's coast, beneath changing skies and steady wind, Skara Brae endures as one of the most complete windows into Neolithic life. Its stone rooms remain open to view, holding within their walls the memory of ordinary lives once lived in rhythm with sea, season, and stone. The Temple of the Sun, stone, light, and the rhythm of the Andes. In the high Andes of Peru, within the historic center of Cusco, there stands a structure that once held the spiritual heart of an empire. The streets around it are now lined with colonial buildings, and the sound of daily life moves through the city. But beneath layers of later construction remain the stone foundations of a temple that once reflected sunlight so brightly it could be seen from a distance. This is the Temple of the Sun, known to the Inca as Coricancha, meaning golden enclosure. More than 500 years ago, Cusco was the capital of the Inca Empire, the largest civilization in pre-Columbian America. The city was designed with symbolic intention. It was shaped to reflect the body of a puma, a sacred animal in Andean belief. At its center stood Coricancha, dedicated to Inti, the sun. For the Inca, the sun was not simply a source of light and warmth. It was a living presence. Inti was regarded as the ancestor of the ruling dynasty. The emperor, or Sapa Inca, was considered the son of the sun. This belief connected political authority directly to celestial movement. The Temple of the Sun became both religious sanctuary and symbol of imperial identity. The walls of Coricancha were constructed with extraordinary precision. Large blocks of finely cut andesite stone were shaped to fit together without mortar. Each stone was polished and aligned carefully, forming joints so tight that even today it is difficult to insert a blade between them. The craftsmanship reflects patience and mastery. The surfaces are smooth, the angles precise, the alignment stable against earthquakes that have shaken the Andes for centuries. Originally, the temple's interior walls were lined with sheets of gold. These sheets were attached to the stone, reflecting sunlight into the courtyard. The temple's name derived from this golden glow. At certain times of day, light would enter the space and scatter across reflective surfaces, creating a sense of movement and radiance. Within the temple complex were smaller shrines dedicated to other celestial bodies, the moon, stars, and thunder. The Inca worldview integrated natural forces into a unified spiritual system. The sun held primary position, but it was part of a larger cosmic balance. The temple courtyard once contained a sacred garden filled with symbolic objects crafted from gold and silver. Chroniclers described life-sized representations of maize plants, animals, and human figures made entirely of precious metal. These were not meant for practical use. They were offerings, expressions of devotion shaped in durable form. The alignment of the temple also reflects astronomical awareness. The Inca observed the movement of the sun across the horizon. During solstices, sunlight entered specific windows and illuminated designated areas within the complex. This connection between architecture and solar cycle reinforced the temple's sacred role. When Spanish forces arrived in Cusco in the 16th century, Coricancha stood as one of the empire's most revered sites. The gold that lined its walls was removed and melted down. Colonial builders constructed the Church of Santo Domingo directly atop the Inca foundations. The new structure rose above the old, yet the Inca stonework remained. Over time, earthquakes struck Cusco repeatedly. Colonial walls collapsed. But the original Inca foundations endured, their precision allowing slight movement without structural failure. Today, visitors can see the contrast clearly. Above, colonial architecture reflects European style. Below, the original Inca stone walls remain steady and intact. The Temple of the Sun no longer glows with gold, but its stone core continues to hold the memory of its former brilliance. Walking through the preserved foundations, one senses scale and intention. The walls curve slightly, following the shape of the land. Niches carved into stone once held sacred objects. The courtyard remains open to the sky, allowing light to enter as it always has. Cusco itself remains active and vibrant. Traffic moves along nearby streets. Voices echo through the plaza. But within the temple's inner space, there is a quieter atmosphere. The Andes rise in the distance, framing the city. The sun continues its daily path overhead. The Inca builders understood the land beneath them. They shaped stone not only for strength, but for alignment with sky and season. Their architecture integrated engineering with belief, creating a structure that functioned as both temple and statement. Coricancha reflects continuity rather than conquest. Though stripped of its gold and altered by later construction, its foundations remain visible and stable. They anchor the present city to its deeper history. The Temple of the Sun was never meant to dominate through height alone. Its power lay in reflection, in how it captured and returned light. Even now, as sunlight moves across its stone surfaces, subtle shadows form along perfectly joined seams. The golden enclosure is no longer golden, but it remains. In the high city of Cusco, beneath changing skies and above enduring stone, the Temple of the Sun continues to rest quietly, holding within its walls the rhythm of light that once defined the heart of an empire. Tacalicabaj terraces, where stone records the dawn of Maya civilization. In the lush foothills of southwestern Guatemala, where volcanic mountains descend toward the Pacific coastal plain, there is an ancient site partially hidden beneath dense vegetation. The air is warm and humid. Trees rise tall above layers of green, and birds move through the canopy unseen. Beneath this living forest lies a city that once stood at the crossroads of early Mesoamerican civilization. This is Tacalicabaj. The name given in modern times means standing stone in the local Quiche Maya language. It is a fitting description. Across the site, carved stone monuments still stand upright, their surfaces weathered but intact. They remain where they were placed more than 2,000 years ago. Tacalicabaj is remarkable not only for its age, but for its position in history. The site dates back to at least 800 BCE, during a time when early complex societies were emerging across Mesoamerica. It occupies a transitional period between the Olmec civilization, often considered one of the earliest in the region, and the later classic Maya world. Walking through Tacalicabaj today, one encounters terraces carved directly into the hillside. These terraces were constructed to create level platforms within uneven terrain. Stone retaining walls hold earth in place, forming broad surfaces upon which buildings once stood. The terraces reflect careful planning. They are not natural formations, they are shaped by human intention. The people who built Tacalicabaj understood the land's contours and adapted them into stable architectural foundations. The hillside became structured into layers, each supporting ceremonial and administrative buildings. Among the terraces stand stone monuments known as stelae. Some bear carvings that reflect Olmec artistic influence, rounded faces, stylized features, and symbolic motifs. Others show emerging Maya characteristics, including early hieroglyphic writing and more refined representation. This blending of styles makes Takalikabaj unique. It represents a cultural bridge. The site appears to have served as a trade and ceremonial center, connecting highland and lowland regions. Goods such as obsidian, jade, and cacao likely passed through its plazas. Its location near important routes would have allowed exchange between distant communities. The terraces supported temples and elite residences. Although many structures were built from perishable materials such as wood and thatch, their stone foundations remain visible. The arrangement of plazas and stairways reflects organized civic planning. Life here followed the rhythm of tropical climate. Rain fell heavily during wet seasons. Crops were planted in surrounding fertile land. The terraces not only provided building platforms, but also managed erosion during rainfall. Water control was essential in such an environment. The carved monuments offer glimpses into leadership and belief. Some stelae depict rulers in ceremonial dress, standing upright with symbolic objects in hand. These figures reflect emerging concepts of divine kingship that would later define Maya civilization. Takalik Abaj also contains early evidence of writing. Inscriptions carved into stone suggest that literacy was developing gradually. These early glyphs represent some of the earliest recorded attempts to preserve events and authority in permanent form. The site's longevity is notable. It was occupied for nearly 1,000 years, evolving through distinct phases. Early Olmec influence gradually gave way to fully Maya characteristics. The terraces and monuments adapted alongside cultural change. This continuity reflects resilience. The community adjusted to shifting political and artistic traditions while maintaining its place within regional networks. Over centuries, however, Takalikabaj was gradually abandoned. The reasons remain uncertain. Political realignment, environmental shifts, or changes in trade routes may have influenced the departure. Without maintenance, structures decayed. Vegetation reclaimed the terraces. Stone monuments remained, but their meanings became silent. For generations, the jungle grew thick around the site, concealing its scale. Only in the 19th and 20th centuries did systematic excavation begin to reveal its layered history. Today, Takalikabaj remains quieter than more widely known Maya cities. The terraces are partially cleared, but much of the surrounding forest still stands close. Walking through the site, one hears insects and distant birds more often than voices. The terraces rise gently along the hillside. The stelae stand in shadow. Moist air carries the scent of earth and leaves. Takalikabaj reflects a formative chapter in Mesoamerican history. It captures a moment when cultures overlapped, when artistic traditions blended, and when political authority began to be recorded in stone. The terraces themselves embody stability. They transformed uneven ground into ordered space. They supported structures meant to endure. They shaped the hillside into a civic landscape. In the tropical foothills of Guatemala, beneath layers of vegetation and shifting light, Takalikabaj continues to rest where it was built. Its terraces hold the memory of a civilization emerging into complexity, bridging eras through stone and silence. And as rain falls gently across the carved platforms and ancient monuments, the site remains, a quiet witness to the dawn of Maya civilization, preserved within the layered earth of the jungle. Porbiejan megaliths, the island fortress of Siberia. In the remote region of Tuva, in southern Siberia near the border with Mongolia, there is a lake surrounded by mountains and wide, open sky. The water is cold and clear. In winter, it freezes into solid ice. In summer, it reflects clouds that drift slowly across the horizon. At the center of this lake, known as Terraceous, lies a small island. On that island stands a rectangular complex of stone walls. This is Porbajin. From above, the structure appears geometric and deliberate. High perimeter walls form a near perfect rectangle, enclosing a grid of foundations and courtyards. The layout is striking against the natural setting of water and mountains. It looks less like a ruin shaped by a gradual settlement and more like a plan drawn with precision. Porbajin was built in the 8th century CE during the time of the Uyghur Khaganate, a Turkic empire that once ruled large parts of Central Asia. The Uyghurs were nomadic in origin, yet they developed urban centers and political structures that reflected growing complexity. The purpose of Porbajin has long remained uncertain. Some scholars believe it was a palace complex. Others suggest it may have served as a monastery, possibly influenced by Manichaeism, a religion adopted by the Uyghur elite during that period. The symmetrical layout, central courtyard, and aligned buildings hint at ceremonial or administrative use rather than purely defensive design. The outer walls are constructed from stone and earth, reinforced with wooden beams. Though weathered and partially collapsed, the rectangular boundary remains clearly visible. Entry points were carefully positioned, allowing controlled access from the lake's edge. The interior reveals a central courtyard surrounded by rooms and smaller structures arranged in ordered rows. The foundations suggest wooden buildings once stood here, supported by timber frames resting upon stone bases. The precision of the layout reflects planning. It was not built gradually, it was designed. The location itself is unusual. Why construct a complex on an isolated island in a remote Siberian lake? Isolation may have offered protection. It may have created a symbolic separation from the surrounding world. The mountains enclosing the lake add to the sense of seclusion. Wind moves across the water, snow falls heavily in winter. The climate is harsh and demanding. Transporting materials to the island required effort. Stone and timber had to be gathered and moved across water or ice. The builders understood seasonal conditions. Construction likely occurred during warmer months when access was possible. Radiocarbon analysis of timber remains suggests that Porbajin was built around 757 CE, during the reign of Bayanchur Khan, a powerful Uyghur ruler. This period marked political consolidation and religious transition within the empire. If Porbajin functioned as a monastery, its layout would align with certain Central Asian religious architectural forms. The central hall and surrounding cells could have housed religious practitioners. The symmetry reflects order and spiritual discipline. Yet, archaeological evidence also suggests that this site may not have been occupied for long. Signs of fire damage have been found. Some structures appear incomplete. There are limited artifacts indicating sustained habitation. It is possible that Porbajin was abandoned shortly after construction, perhaps due to political upheaval, environmental challenges, or structural instability. The island's ground sits atop permafrost, which can shift as temperatures change. Such movement may have compromised the buildings. After abandonment, the complex remained exposed to Siberian weather. Harsh winters and shifting soil gradually weakened the walls. Wood decayed, roofs collapsed, but the stone outlines endured. For centuries, Porbajin remained largely unknown outside local knowledge. Its remote location limited access. Only in the 20th century did systematic archaeological study begin. Excavations revealed the scale and precision of the complex. Aerial surveys highlighted its geometric symmetry. The contrast between the rigid rectangular design and the organic curves of lake and mountains remains striking. Standing on the island today, one hears wind moving steadily across open space. The lake surrounds the walls in quiet reflection. Snow-capped peaks frame the horizon. The ruins rise low against the sky, their shapes softened by time. Porbajan reflects a moment of ambition. It reflects an empire experimenting with permanence in a landscape traditionally shaped by movement. Nomadic cultures often leave fewer fixed monuments. Here, however, the Uyghurs constructed something lasting, even if briefly used. The structure's symmetry conveys order. Its isolation conveys intention. Its silence conveys mystery. The island fortress remains unchanged in its position. Ice forms and melts around it each year. Grass grows between stones. The mountains remain as distant guardians. In the heart of Siberia, far from dense cities and constant sound, Porbajan continues to stand upon its island, its megalithic walls outlining a vision from more than 12 centuries ago. The purpose may remain uncertain, but the form endures. And beneath the vast sky of Tuva, where water reflects clouds and wind crosses open ground, the island fortress of Porbajan remains, a quiet geometric presence in the stillness of Siberia. Kerma de Fufa, the tower of ancient Nubia. In northern Sudan, along a great bend of the Nile River, there lies the remains of one of Africa's earliest urban centers. The land here is dry and open, framed by desert stretching outward beyond the fertile strip that borders the river. The Nile flows steadily past fields and villages, as it has for thousands of years. Rising from this landscape is a massive mud brick structure, unlike anything else in the region. This is the Kerma de Fufa. The word Defufa refers to a large mud brick building, and at Kerma there are two such structures. The most prominent, often called the Western Defufa, stands nearly 20 meters high. Its form is rectangular with sloping walls and a flat top. From a distance, it appears almost like a natural outcrop of earth. But as one approaches, the scale and intention become clear. The Kerma civilization flourished between approximately 2500 and 1500 BCE, during a time when ancient Egypt was rising to power to the north. Kerma was not a minor settlement. It was the capital of a powerful Nubian kingdom that controlled trade routes along the Nile and into Central Africa. The Western Defufa likely served as a temple or ceremonial center. Its construction required enormous labor. Mud bricks were shaped from Nile silt, dried under the sun, and stacked in thick walls that could support great height. The builders reinforced the structure with internal chambers and staircases. Narrow passageways wind upward inside, leading to the top platform. From the summit, one can see across the surrounding plain and toward the Nile. The elevation may have symbolized connection between earth and sky, between community and the divine. Inside the structure, traces of painted plaster have been discovered on interior walls. These paintings suggest that the Defufa was not merely functional, but sacred. Rituals may have taken place within its chambers. Offerings may have been made to deities central to Nubian belief. Kerma was a city of considerable scale. Archaeological excavations have revealed residential areas, administrative buildings, and vast burial grounds. The royal cemetery at Kerma contains massive tumuli, circular burial mounds covering the graves of Nubian rulers. Some of these tombs are among the largest in Africa from that period. The Defufa stood at the heart of this city. It reflected authority and continuity. Unlike stone temples of Egypt, the Defufa was built from earth. Yet it has endured for over 4,000 years. The dryness of the region contributed to its preservation. Rainfall is limited, and the thick mud brick walls resisted erosion over centuries. Though weathered and partially collapsed in places, the core structure remains standing. Kerma's position along the Nile made it a center of trade and interaction. Goods moved between sub-Saharan Africa and Egypt. Gold, ivory, ebony, cattle, and exotic animals. The Kerma kingdom was both a rival and trading partner to Egypt. At times, conflict erupted. At other times, diplomacy prevailed. Egyptian records mention Kush, the region of Nubia, as both adversary and ally. Kerma's rulers maintained their independence for centuries before eventual Egyptian conquest during the New Kingdom period. The Dafufa reflects this era of Nubian strength. Its mass and scale communicate confidence. It does not rely on ornamentation for impact. Its power lies in presence. Climbing the internal stairways today, one moves through narrow corridors formed by ancient bricks. The air inside remains cooler than outside. Light enters through small openings, illuminating the rough texture of mud brick walls. At the top, the view extends outward across the ancient city site. Foundations of buildings stretch in low outlines. Beyond them, the Nile continues its quiet flow. The Kerma civilization eventually declined under Egyptian control. Political structures shifted. Cultural exchange intensified. Later Nubian kingdoms would rise, including the kingdom of Kush, centered at Napata and Meroe. But the Dafufa remained. It stood as witness to transformation. It endured through empire and change. Its walls absorbed heat and cold. Its surfaces weathered under desert wind. But its form remained recognizable against the horizon. Today, the Kerma Dafufa stands as one of the oldest surviving large-scale mud brick structures in Africa. It represents an early chapter of African urban history, often overshadowed by neighboring Egypt. Yet, Kerma was not merely influenced by Egypt. It possessed its own identity, its own architecture, its own rulers. The Dafufa rises quietly from Sudanese soil, neither towering like a pyramid nor hidden beneath sand. It occupies a space between monument and landscape. In the stillness of the Nubian plain, where the Nile bends gently and desert stretches wide, the Kerma Dafufa continues to endure, a tower of earth shaped by ancient hands, marking the center of a civilization that flourished along Africa's great river thousands of years ago. Dun Carloway, the stone tower of the Hebrides. On the Isle of Lewis in Scotland's Outer Hebrides, where the Atlantic Ocean presses steadily against rugged coastline, there stands a circular stone tower rising from a green hillside. The air is cool and often filled with wind moving in from the sea. Grass bends low across the land, and clouds drift quickly across a wide northern sky. This is Dun Carloway. Built nearly 2,000 years ago during the Iron Age, Dun Carloway is one of the best preserved brocks in Scotland. Brocks are tall, circular stone towers, unique to northern Scotland, constructed without mortar and designed with remarkable structural precision. From a distance, Dun Carloway appears solid and compact, its thick stone walls forming a nearly perfect circle. The tower rises to a height of more than 9 meters, though it once stood even taller. Its stones were carefully stacked, each piece balanced upon the next, creating a stable structure that has endured centuries of Atlantic weather. The walls are not solid throughout. Brocks are double-walled structures with an inner and outer layer of stone separated by a hollow space. Within this hollow section, stairways and small chambers were built, allowing movement upward through the tower. Entering Dun Carloway today, one passes through a low doorway framed by large stone slabs. The entrance faces roughly east, possibly to capture morning light or to shield against prevailing winds from the west. Inside, the circular chamber opens upward, exposed now to the sky. Originally, wooden floors would have divided the interior into levels. Beams set into the stone walls supported these platforms, creating living space above ground level. The purpose of brocks like Dun Carloway has long been debated. Some scholars suggest they served as defensive structures, offering protection during conflict. The thick walls and elevated entrance design would have made them difficult to breach. Others believe brooks were symbols of status and community identity, reflecting social organization and craftsmanship rather than purely military function. It is possible that they served both purposes. Dun Carloway stands on elevated ground overlooking nearby lochs and farmland. From its upper levels, inhabitants could observe surrounding territory and approaching visitors. The height of the structure would have offered strategic advantage, as well as visibility across the landscape. Life within the Broch likely centered around agriculture and animal husbandry. The Isle of Lewis, though remote, provided pasture for sheep and cattle. Fishing and gathering resources from the sea would have supplemented daily life. The interior chamber of Dun Carloway feels enclosed and quiet. The thick stone walls absorb sound. Light filters down from above, illuminating the rough texture of stacked rock. Narrow openings within the walls lead to stairways that spiral upward between the inner and outer layers. Climbing these internal steps, one moves through confined passages carved into stone. The design reflects careful planning. Each stone was selected and positioned without mortar, relying solely on weight and balance to maintain stability. The construction of a broch required coordination and skill. Stones had to be gathered from the surrounding landscape, shaped roughly, and stacked with attention to alignment. The builders understood load distribution and structural integrity, creating towers that have withstood centuries of wind and rain. Dun Carloway remained in use for several centuries, from around the 1st century BCE into the early centuries CE. Over time, its function may have changed. Later inhabitants adapted the structure to suit their needs, possibly using it as shelter long after its original purpose faded. By the medieval period, the tower was partially ruined, yet it continued to stand as a landmark on the hillside. The Atlantic climate shaped its endurance. Strong winds, salt air, and seasonal storms weathered the stone surface, smoothing edges but not displacing the core structure. The weight of the double walls provided resilience against external forces. Today, visitors approach Dun Carloway along a quiet path through grassland. Sheep graze nearby. The sea can be glimpsed in the distance, its surface shifting beneath changing light. Standing inside the tower, one senses both enclosure and openness. Though the roof is gone, the circular form remains complete. The sky above feels close, framed by ancient stone. Brochs are unique to Scotland, and Dun Carloway stands among the finest examples of this architectural tradition. Its survival allows insight into Iron Age life in the Hebrides, a world shaped by isolation, resilience, and adaptation to harsh environment. The structure reflects more than defense. It reflects permanence. It reflects the effort of a community, shaping stone into shelter and symbol. As wind moves across the Isle of Lewis and waves continue their steady rhythm along the coast, Dun Carloway remains rooted in its hillside. It does not dominate the landscape aggressively. It rises quietly, integrated with grass and sky. In the cool air of the outer Hebrides, beneath shifting clouds and steady Atlantic wind, the stone tower of Dun Carloway continues to endure, its circular walls holding the silent memory of lives once lived within its sheltering embrace.